Behind me is a 2004 Toyota Sienna. We're going to be replacing the spark plugs. Hopefully this is a good angle for you guys to see everything. First thing we want to do is just take off this engine cover. It's a 5mm Allen. You can see the front 3 spark plugs are right there. Super easy to get to. It's the back 3 that are a little more challenging. You have to take off the intake manifold, which really isn't too difficult, but takes time and is a little involved. We'll go ahead and knock these out real quick. Sometimes these connectors, the little clips on here, will break pretty easily, especially on an older vehicle. I like to use just a little pick like this, and you get underneath it from the front. Oh, look. See, so that's what I'm talking about, just brittle. $10mm. Usually if a vehicle manufacturer wants you to put anti-seize on the new plugs before installing them, they'll have some kind of note in the service manual whether to do that or not do that. In this service manual, there is no note regarding anti-seize to put it on, not put it on. So we'll leave that up to you as a personal choice. I do not use power tools while putting them in, it's just hand threaded. And these will be torqued to 18 foot-pounds. Before installing the coils back in, we'll put a little dielectric grease or silicone paste, just a dab on the tip before putting it in. Just like that. And the fronts are done as simple as that. Now, let's pull things off so we can get to the back. So we need to pull off this intake manifold here, this upper intake. So it's really just a matter of disconnecting hoses and plugs and stuff until everything is just moved out of the way. So I'm going to start with the air box and just kind of work my way towards the intake, just pulling stuff off. Well, there are a couple coolant hoses that need to come off, connected to the throttle body. So just have a catch pan underneath. So the intake doesn't have to be moved out of the vehicle. It just needs to be pushed to the side here. So just to show you some of the things that got disconnected that maybe you didn't see in the camera, that coolant hose there, there's a hose here, those get disconnected. You may not need to disconnect those. If it moves over enough without disconnecting them, then you don't have to. But I have those disconnected. There's a hose here. This little thing is held on by 2 10mm bolts, some vacuum hoses. This vacuum hose here is off, and that's pretty much it. The throttle body can stay electrically connected, so that's not a big deal. So let's find the torque size. I think it's a 10mm, not Torx, but Allen. I think it's a 10mm. Let me double check that. And then a 14mm. We've got 2 14mm, and then these in the front are the Allen. All right, so the Allens are actually 8mm Allen, and then a 14mm socket. All right, it'd be a good idea before we pull that intake up to just vacuum it out really good. You could blow it with the compressor, but then dust gets everywhere. I like to use a vacuum and just vacuum all around it real good, so there's no dirt and debris that can get in the intake. All right, we want to remove the cowl. Now we can go ahead and remove this metal support. By removing that cowl piece, that just gives us room. There's 3 brackets in the back of the manifold, 2 by the throttle body and then 1 on this side. This is going to be the hardest one to get, but that opens up room that we can work. Let me show you underneath. I don't know if you can see that black post right there. Focus. There, that black post there is one, and then there's one right over here. Right there's another one, so they're kind of next to each other. So there's bolts in the back that you can get to. So there's 2 on this side, and then there's a bracket. Let's see if I can point it out. It's back. Well, it's back on this side. You'll be able to see it kind of right there, that black post in the back. Either way, we gotta disconnect those, and then the intake can come up and out. All right, got it. That far one over there is 14 millimeter. The other 2 are 12 millimeter. Having a ratcheting wrench like this definitely helped get that 14 millimeter off. And then having a ratchet also with a swivelly head helped me get those 12 millimeters off. Now the intake should be ready to pop off. Just the PCV hose I forgot. And that's out of the way enough. So let me reposition the camera so you can see all the room we have now. All right, so now you can see the access to the back 3. 1, 2, 3. Very easy to get to. Little involved getting everything apart to this point, but really not that bad. You're just unbolting things. That cowl may seem like, oh man, that's a lot of work. But once you get the wipers out of the way, which are 14 millimeter bolts, those come off. Everything else is just 10 millimeter all the way around. A couple connectors come out. This little harness here. And then these connectors, you can see, they pinch right here and come out of the hole. So if you're prying on them from up above, trying to get them out, it's not gonna work. They're just gonna break. But if you pinch them from underneath, then they just pull right out, no problem. And then getting those back, you can see them real good now. A support bracket here, and then those 2 support brackets. That's the chore. Everything else is just really easy. Just hoses coming undone, a couple of bolts here and there. Not too difficult. All right, well, let's whip these out real quick, start putting things back together. All right, now we're ready to lay the intake back on. Make sure that your surface is nice and clean. I put a rag over here just so I didn't drop any bolts or any dirt in the intake. So I recommend that. Rag, you can stuff the holes with rags or whatever. But I'd take some brake clean, go ahead and just spray it down real good, make sure it's a nice clean surface. These intake gaskets are reusable. Examine yours though. If it looks like it could be replaced, then now's the perfect time to just slap in a new upper intake manifold gasket. All right, now we can get our brackets in the back tightened down. So we're just going to put those in snug, and then we'll torque down our intake manifold first before tightening those all the way up. But we're just putting them in there snug. With these not in, it allows it to move, so you can just move it around, find the little holes. It's all done by feel. It's got to feel it. So I couldn't find torque specs on the upper intake manifold. Toyota calls it an intake air surge tank. So I couldn't find torque specs. So use your judgment. Now that this is tight, we can go ahead and get those support brackets tight. All right, now we can just start getting all the hoses and connectors and all that on here first. We'll put the cowl on last. Don't forget the PCV hose in the back. That can be easy to forget. And don't forget these lower hoses there too. Can be easy to forget as well. All right, everything looks good. Just double check that you got everything plugged in, hoses and all that. You can go ahead and fire it up before we put the cowl back on. Make sure it runs good. No misfires or anything crazy like that. All right, sounds good. Let's go ahead and put our cowl back on. All right, that's back together. We'll turn our window wipers on. Just make sure that they still have their range like they're supposed to and they're set in place. All right. Well, there you go. That's how you can replace spark plugs on a Toyota Sienna. The front three are pretty straightforward, easy to get to. It's the back three that are a little more involved. The upper intake manifold has to come off. In order for that to come off, the cowl piece has to come out. The wiper motor has to come out. Really not too challenging. Just some bolts that you have to get off. Hoses, connectors to get that intake manifold off. Now, when those back support brackets, those were kind of hard to get off, but once they were off and the manifold is ready to come up, so you're looking at the engine, it would be on my left side. So that left was kind of binding up. It was a little hard, so I just used a little pry bar. Not crazy, you know, if it's stuck, you don't want to pry too hard. It's plastic. But it was just binding up, just a little help, and then it came up and out. That was the only real thing. Otherwise, you know, those back support brackets is the hardest part of the job. Once you have all that removed, those three spark plugs right there. So that's that. If you have any questions, comments, post it down below. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. See you on the next one.